thank you. Thanks so much, Amanda, March, and Alex for organizing all of it. And if I can just ask some of you, just have your camera on, so I actually get a sense that I speak to real human beings, not to just black flat tiles. That would be wonderful. I think to just begin all of this, I think my desire would be to meet in this sort of one big bubble, this wonderful space of imagination we all inhabit. So I just invite everyone to take like a very sort of healthy and wholesome deep breath, so we all can feel that we just really actually fertilizing the air in honor, and I guess maybe in to compensate perhaps those artificial clouds that are made somewhere far away that we don't know where, and are cooling the servers that are allowing us this continuous extraction that we are taking part in nonetheless. So yeah. And I guess my presentation won't be as neat as the previous speakers. I'm just gonna improvise and tell you a few stories. And I guess this one, I'm not entirely sure really why I want to show it, but I want to show it anyway, because I guess this got something to do with those sorts of cultural clashes about which Agata Pizik speaks very eloquently in her book Poor by Sexy, where she explored the cultural clashes between Western and Eastern Europe. And she speaks about the facts how we actually we don't pick our ideas in supermarkets. So here you go. I just want to start with this little video of the YouTube. So this is where I come from. This specific place is actually the smallest nature reserve in Poland, and is a nature reserve that is dedicated to this one specific species of a plant, of this sort of Azalea pontica. And the legend has it that Tatars, Mongols brought this plant when they invaded Eastern Europe, and possibly planted it on the grave of the great Mongolian Tatar warrior. But also some sciences speculate that this is possibly is a relic of that comes from before the Ice Age. So yeah, I just want to show you that this is, I'm already sort of entangled, I'm already part of this sort of rich culture, and perhaps now thinking about what I'm doing as a part of my doctoral research, I very often reflect on that and think that maybe it's myself still is trying to make sense of some sorts of information that I received through participating in this sort of tangle of nature culture, where actually everyone is consuming indigenous microorganisms, that everyone is involved in some way of creating local culture somehow. because yeah, we have this plant that came from somewhere and it's been turned into nature reserve, and there's like a festival dedicated to this plant, and people really celebrate it. You go as a child to visit it, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And people also consume this plant. You can make yourself a wonderful infusion that is very soothing for your nerves. So in my practice, I engage with many different makings and many different disciplines. In a way, I can say everything goes. And I do like to think that now I'm living my practice, and I make many different things, engage with many different materials. As you can see behind me, I'm also at the moment making traditional skeps, traditional beehives. So I'm making homes for the bees. So this sort of engagement with hands-on, with actually this continuous propagation of life, this aliveness is really important for my practice. And in my doctoral research, really what I was doing, I was looking at this concept put forward by Sasha Kagan called Aesthetics of Sustainability. And I was specifically looking at already existing sustainable land practices internationally, and trying to figure it out how learning about those sustainable land practices can inform my sort of very eclectic multimedia arts practice. And so this adventure took me to all sorts of places. And yeah, I involved with different non-humans. I involved myself very deeply with more than human world. And here is the Garden of Resistance, a new matrix and a time to come. So this is the project that I've done actually in Liverpool as a part of a residency by Northern Film and Media. It was moving research residency, but actually I was more interested in sort of in working with people and engaging with real already existing alternatives. Sort of like I'm trying to make alternatives feasible, and for me, it's really important actually to show that people are on the ground, they're involved in trying to transform the world we live in. So what you see on those images are actually, there are 4 allotment plots that were taken over probably nearly 20 years ago, and they are all designed on sort of permaculture principles, and they gather a community of different activists. So there are Sea Shepherds, which is like this sort of radical militant branch of Greenpeace. There are anti-frackers and all sorts of different activists who come together to this place to look after this piece of land, to allow this abundance, this aliveness to perpetuate. And they also share their experiences. So all the way through the residency, I spent a lot of time in different sorts of community garden and speaking to people and enjoying the interactions with the living world and with the sorts of with a very honest encounter and communion-like encounter that is obviously transformative and really life enriching. So what I end up doing, it wasn't as such a moving image. I organized this event, the whole day event, which was called Garden of Resistance, a new matrix and a time to come, where I invited people to this sort of communal celebration of the place, of this garden at the Edgehill at Metal, and also to celebrate this sort of wilder issues, this sort of deeper values that we want to live by. So I brought together different activists, different sorts of local artist-led initiatives, and we created this whole day immersion that started with actually meeting together and going through this process that within social sculpture is called Earth Forum, and we were trying to imagine this better future that actually very much relies on leveling and destroying hierarchy of privileging any sorts of knowledges. This is very important, and I'm really interested in this, how we actually can make can stop believing basically that other people believe naively, and that's like is Bruno Latour's sort of wonderful phrase. So this event brought different activists, different people to sit around the fire and share their approaches to activists, to sort of like living and really activating this micro political sorts of protest through different actions. So we were reading poetry. I had a local party member, local activist who actually she written a poem for this occasion, and she read the poem to all of us. I had a anarchist who was speaking about anarchy in every day, and there was also a psychologist who was actually her specific sort of a way of working with psychology is to help people to disengage from capitalism. So she was speaking about like sort of psychology of money. Now we have a breather. And yeah, like as you can see, I'm interested in sort of utilizing psychotronic devices, the sort of like interactive, creating an artwork that is in some way this interactive device between mind and matter, and is there to activate this sort of still this moment that you can receive some more information. So I went to the rainforest to try to make sense of permaculture, really, because I came across of this anecdotal retelling of the impetus for permaculture, which is obviously founded by David Holmgren and Bill Mollison, and apparently both of them have this moment, some amazing, wonderful aesthetic experience, really, in the Tasmanian rainforest, where they were astonished by this sorts of sheer wonder and ineffable mystery of this abundance. And that's what was this impetus to create permaculture. So I went to the rainforest to experience this to myself. I went with ideas of Eduardo Kahn, of the sort of Sylvan thinking, how we can think with the forest, how sort of whole ecosystem is already this grammar, is this semiosis, is this sort of world of information, and how, yeah, what I can learn from that actually. But what I've done there, I've learned that the whole Amazon rainforest actually is being domesticated. Amazon rainforest is like man-made landscape. So they're discovering more and more of the black soil all over the Amazon. And Anat Singh speaks about those anthropocentric landscape as a sort of slow disturbance landscape that involve man-disturbed landscape. They involve this sort of very intense, very detailed collaboration and interaction between man and multiple other species. So yeah, I wanted to share this experience in the form of exhibition because I'm still interested in making exhibitions. So yeah, I devised this machine loosely based on Fibonacci sequence. That is this sort of numerical formula that apparently powers the natures, is present everywhere, is present in this wonderful borage flower or in this wonderful fern. And yeah, I imagine that this sort of sequence can run art. And I brought bits and bobs of my forest garden in the making into this exhibition. And it was just like, yet again, very important for me to create this experience for people, to share this experience of actually this conundrum, this complexity conundrum, how we actually can make sense of making culture.
Well, permaculture. Permaculture means the kind of permanent culture, and I'm pretty interested in how we can develop our culture. You know, for the last 400 years, I think that there was a kind of economic development all over the world. It was called global economics or globalization. But you know, I feel that such kind of economical development cannot get along with the local culture. Yeah. So when we look back our history, in North America or in Asia, such kind of globalization shares a lot of local culture. Yeah. But such local culture make it possible that we survive, we live with nature for more than hundreds of thousands of years. So we need to keep our own culture. That's a very basic idea. But as I told you that the such globalization kills a lot of local, very important culture already. So we need to find out how we can create a new culture to make our lifestyle more sustainable. Yeah, and I think that permaculture can be a key concept to build up such kind of a new sustainable society. That's why I joined the movement of permaculture. What permaculture? Permaculture means the kind of permanent culture.
So that's Kiyo of Permaculture Japan. Let's see for this slide. So actually, my sort of reason of going to Japan was to explore nature farming as put forward and really propagated by Matsunobu Fukuoka and his really sort of iconic work of straw revolution. So it wasn't actually possible for me to go and see Fukuoka's place because it's not there anymore. But nonetheless, I actually I own a lot to sort of Matsunobu Fukuoka and his way of thinking. So his whole approach was actually about the farming that allows human to grow. So he spoke about like ultimate goal of farming. It wasn't actually growing the crops, but it was the cultivation and perfection of human being. And his sort of whole approach was like do nothing, just observe and interact. Like be very mindful, be very sort of receptive, be deeply engaged with nature, and then see what else can come from that relationship. So Fukuoka speaks about haiku found in ancient Japanese temples, haiku that was done by ancient farmers who actually during the winter or during the seasons that you don't have to invest yourself that much into working in the fields, have time to produce poetry. And he contrasts this with contemporary farmers who obviously don't write poetry. So yeah, that through Matsunobu Fukuoka, I've learned about Shindo Fuji, which is this sort of phrase that means the earth and body are not two. And this phrase is used in Japanese context to advocate for sorts of self-sufficiency, for sustainability, and for sorts of producing locally. I also work with this Institute of Nature and Humanity from Kyoto, who introduced me to sorts of Satoyama, which is another this traditional landscape aesthetic, which is composed of the mosaic of different ecosystems of forests and meadows and wetlands, and it very much still relies on sorts of cherishing and honoring the spirits in the forest. So, for example, this specific farm that you're looking at now is a wasabi farm. And this place really truly resembles like Japanese temple with its sort of sensorial ambience. And yeah, this example is really wonderful because it shows you that the plant that evolved specifically in isolation on the island there has been cultivated by people there. It's been cultivated for the reasons that they believe that it possesses this genetic information that is good for the land and for the people. And they really celebrate the sorts of the plant itself, but the whole community is involved in caring for different parts of this sorts of Satoyama, this kaleidoscopic collection of different ecosystems, because you need to have very pure water to grow this wasabi. Down the stream there are also rice terraces, and shiitake mushrooms are being grown in the forest that is there to shade the wasabi. And people very much, there's this wonderful phrase, people just speculate or question. They believe that actually there is this interesting way, this question, who is actually cultivating who? Is it the forest that cultivates wasabi, or is it people that cultivate wasabi, or is it the wasabi that cultivates forest? Another example of sort of Satoyama, I'm seeing in different prefecture, which is dedicated to ume, the Japanese apricot that is also believed to possess really amazing medicinal properties similar to wasabi. And also this specific sort of ecosystem has got this very strong relationship with Japanese honeybee. So all across the little hills and little sorts of terraces and orchards, there are log hives that actually they're there to look and care for the bee. And that yet again there's this question, who is actually cultivating whom? I also visited some Satoyama library medicinal gardens that are believed to have those amazing healing properties, because there are some mysterious really, stories about mercury being mined. So after that, I went to Australia, where initially actually I wanted to learn a bit more about permaculture, but by that time I engaged a lot with sorts of wonderful thinkers, feminist eco-philosophers who come from Australia. And I learned about this sort of contemporary research that is coming to the fore about Australia also being the whole Australia before British people came there was actually cultivated, was looked after by Aboriginal people. And there is this wonderful seminal book by Bill Gomage, which is called The Biggest Estate on Earth. And that was actually, that's why English people wanted it, because the whole land looked like massive, really looked after estate. But what was happening there, it was actually the whole ecosystem was really carefully managed by Aboriginal people by a few different ways, but main predominant way is this fire stick farming. So Aboriginal people utilized fire as this method of looking after the environment that is really an allowing to create more than sustainability. And that's what Bill Gomage speaks about, that is actually more than sustainability. It's like to create this plethora of abundance on wildlife that obviously is only possible when you have tremendous knowledge of fauna and flora. And not only that, also you can recognize the weather. You have to know where the wind blows. So in this way, you can control the fire. But the main thing is that actually this fire stick farming is governed by the dreaming. And the dreaming, as we hopefully all know, is this sort of elusive, this not very rigid Aboriginal philosophy and religion that is believed that the dreaming gives life to life, is responsible for all of the biotic sorts of aliveness, and the dreaming still sort of governs the land management of Kakadu, of this Aboriginal land that I visited. And I also, within this context, I was really compelled to see the rock art, all this sorts of artistic culture tradition. And this art is always is the self-referential system of knowledge, is encoded knowledge, and is always bound to the land, is about this sort of metabolic and relationship with the landscape. And it's got this also interestingly very sort of shape-shifting function, that it changes with the changes of the environment. And traveling through this Aboriginal land, also those wonderful fleshy termite mounds were calling for my attention, and I learned about sorts of termites. They are sort of those wonderful social insects that are very often being compared to this brain, massive crawling brain, and they are guided by this innate aesthetic of how things should feel. And I started to think that actually, wow, Aboriginal people are very much like termites, engaged in this continuous sorts of gut celebration, in this metabolic and erotic sorts of understanding of the landscape. So they shape the landscape, is constantly feedbacking on them, but they obviously returning something, giving back to cultivate, to allow this flourishing, this multi-species flourishing. So yeah, being called by this sorts of social insects and trying to make sense of this, yet again, I say complexity conundrum, I ended up doing this wonderful residency for PhD researchers in Spain and learning about natural beekeeping. So the residency was focused on superorganisms and was organized by Manchester Metropolitan. And that's where I spent 2 weeks of actually learning about natural beekeeping. That is this sort of our European tradition of looking after the bee, that is not centered on sourcing of resourcing from bee. You don't treat a bee as a resource anymore. You just treat a bee as a sort of way to learn that the whole nature is a beekeeper. So that's I spent the whole time to gathering herbs and having wonderful conversation, and altogether this was wonderful immersion in a different type of learning, the type of learning that actually really harnesses like a contemplative approaches. So we were spending a lot of time just sitting by the hives, and that's where I exercised for the first time my thinking about building this apparatus, this art as an apparatus that I call this now. Art that I'm doing is this apparatus for resurgence in trophallaxis, and it's loosely based on bee's nervous system and on a numerical formula that operates the bee. So I built this little device that includes a time machine with different sorts of herb incense, and I also made a balm for the bees and for the people from locally gathered herbs, from locally pressed olive oil. And yeah, since then I haven't stopped filling the jars.